It is about American-backed coups.
Oh, that's a good video.
Wait.
Yeah, I was gonna go watch that.
There's a weapon that powerful countries use to get rid of leaders they don't like.
Yo, it's not because I don't align with your moral code.
xQc chair, xQc
Right?
chair,
Chat, it's not because I don't align with your moral code, right? That I have no morals. I pick and choose what my moral code is, right? And I don't give a fuck what yours is. Okay? For me, watching videos of other people is within the confines of my moral code, right?
Yeah, same.
As long as the person hasn't said, yo, I don't like you doing this to my shit, then I believe it to be fair game unless they say something. And historically, I've been spot on like 90% of the time. 99.9% plus, right?
Yeah,
Only
I don't
problem,
care.
right?
I just
is when
watch
they
the
say, yo,
video.
I don't like that, and you keep doing it. That's
It's
when the
fine to
problem
watch the
occurs,
video.
right? But if a guy says
And
ahead of time,
expecting
guys, I want people to
some
go to my Patreon,
people not
and
to
I
watch your
go
video is
against
ridiculous.
That's just wrong. I believe that to be
It's
wrong.
ludicrous.
So I don't fucking do it.
And expecting people not to have input and think of their own, share their
You say
ideas,
blah, blah, blah,
that's
but you know
also
who couldn't say blah, blah,
ridiculous
blah?
and ludicrous.
Last night your mother
That's
was
my
had my
take.
cock in her mouth. She couldn't say blah blah blah. She was enjoying all of it. Yummy.
Like leaders from other countries. It's called a coup. It's a French word that means a punch or a
coup.
blow, because it kind of means coming in and forcibly punching out a government from power. No elections, no process, just power being seized. Just someone being pushed out and someone being put in. Coups happen in so many different ways, but I want to show you how the coup has been used by the United States of America as a tool to get what they want on the world stage. So let me walk you through some of the major US-led coups over the years to show you that while it sometimes
Well,
seems like
Iraq.
we live in a world full of order and rules, the reality is that the most powerful countries will often get their way by whatever means necessary. Okay, so here's how I'm
We'll see if
defining
this is biased or
the
not.
US-led coups that I'm going to
Yes,
put on our
it's
list here.
always
Number one,
biased.
they were successful. There's a
That
lot of
doesn't
failed
mean it's
coup
always
attempts.
bad.
We're leaving those out. Number two, there must be at least one US government official involved in the coup. And number three, we need concrete
Because
evidence
someone's
that
bias
the
can
US
be
was actually
better than
involved,
someone
not just
else's.
speculation. While the US has been involved in tons of regime change efforts around the world, we landed on a much shorter list. These are the coups that I think best exemplify how this tool has been used for international power over the years.
It also has to be a coup itself, though. It has to be it. For it to be a coup, it is
Let's
certain
start
criteria, though.
In the independent country of Hawaii. It's 1893, and the US is feeling like the Hawaiian Queen is a threat to American control over sugar. It's sugar that's being grown by the descendants of white American missionaries who had settled in Hawaii over the years. So the US sends a military ship with hundreds of troops to show up to Honolulu, and they overthrow the Queen, installing one of those descendants of the Christian missionaries, Sanford B. Dole, as the new president. Notice his last name? Yeah, this coup was
Wait.
one of the US's first, and it set the stage not
The
only
guy that
for the
does
new Hawaiian
the little
president's
cups.
family to grow their powerful international corporation, which was based in Hawaii, but also for Hawaii to be annexed, to become a part of the United States. I made a whole video on this coup because it's pretty wild and there's so much going on here, and it was really a turning point in showing how the US could remove leaders from power in faraway places, something that they start to do a lot more of. We're going to move on to the next coup, but I need to thank today's sponsor who makes these videos possible. Thank you, North. Here, because things are about to heat up, we got a lot more to cover on these coups. The next coup has to do with Spain. Well, actually
use
more like
NordVPN.
Spain's colonies.
I use that. I think it's pretty
Spain's
good.
glory days have
Yeah, I
come
got a
and gone.
good
They are
deal
a declining
on this
empire,
thing called
and there
Atlas,
is major resistance
and they
in their
switched me
colonies,
over.
especially in Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the
So now I get a
Philippines.
more
Wait,
expensive
hold on.
VPN.
He listened. Wait, chat. Look, look. In his other video, he had this thing, but it was the top and it was really small. I said, yo, if you hear my criticism, dude, this should be bigger and more important in the video because it's a cool feature. It just has to be more on there. And this video, it's way bigger and way more prominent. What is he? This video's 1 year old.
Meanwhile, the US is a rising empire. And they already are pretty uncomfortable with Spain having colonies like 100 miles off their coast. But at the same time, they don't love the idea of true independence for places like Cuba or Puerto Rico. These are strategic islands right in the US's neighborhood. And, like Hawaii, American companies have money invested, particularly in Cuba. Independence might mean them getting kicked out. So the US delves into this fight between Spain and their colonies. They use the explosion of an American Navy ship as their excuse, even though it was likely an accident, not an attack. But sometimes stories matter more than truth. So the US sends in troops to liberate the rebels fighting against their Spanish colonizers, promising them independence. Not only in Cuba and Puerto Rico, but later over here in the Philippines and Guam. These local uprisings eventually drive out the Spanish. And in all of these cases, the US reneges on their promise to give independence to these locals. And they figure out ways to govern Cuba and Puerto Rico indirectly themselves. The US has just piggybacked off several independence movements to enact several coups at once, allowing them to install pro-American leaders and a Navy base in Cuba.
Chat, is this Florida? It's that close.
And eventually annexing Puerto Rico and Guam, which they still control, and the Philippines,
Florida
which they
used
held
to be
for 48 years. Again, I made a whole video about this one too if you want to go deeper. Anyway, we got to move a little quicker here because we're not going to get through all these coups. Let's move on. Okay, so we're over here in Nicaragua. It's 1909. There's a bunch of powerful American companies here, but a new president comes to power vowing to regulate them. The US is not going to let this happen. So the Secretary of State starts spreading rumors to smear this guy, this president, saying that he's building a canal that would compete with the Panama Canal.
Chat, the what? Chat, this country? Chat, the what? I think he might have just said it in the middle of the video for no reason. As he was pointing out a country, I think he said it.
But really, they're just upset because Nicaragua is taking loans from Europe. The US keeps painting this guy as a war criminal and someone worthy of being thrown out. So push comes to shove, and the US sends ships to both of Nicaragua's coasts. They assemble a bunch of Marines in Panama, basically just flexing on Nicaragua and telling the president to step down. And the benefit of being a rising superpower is that it worked. He has no choice but to step down. And soon, a leader that the US likes comes to power. The coup is complete, and really, this is the first of many instances of the US meddling in Nicaragua. A few years later, the US is back in the region for another coup in next-door Honduras. This one was plotted by a band of private American citizens, and it follows a similar pattern. A new president comes to town, in this case directly inspired by Nicaragua's president, and he wants to take back control of the country from American businesses. In this case, we're talking about bananas. The banana companies were not going to let this happen. And it was mostly this guy, a banana businessman named Sam the Banana Man. He's not going to let this pesky president run his country. No. So he assembles his own militia. He literally buys a surplus Navy ship, loads it up with weapons, and starts his campaign to get this president out. He sails from New Orleans to the coast of Honduras, and he literally invades the country with like a private army.
Wait, dude, this is like ultra super insane like gangsterism, dude.
This guy looks like a mafia boss.
It's like some fucking war on drugs shit.
Where's the U.S. government?
It's like the banana lord.
They also didn't like the political direction of Honduras either, so they just sort of stood back. Let this private invasion happen, and then at the critical moment, the U.S. steps in to order a ceasefire, basically bullying the president to step down. He had no way forward, no defense.
The government went and said, guys, stop. Instead of arresting the fucking United States guy at home, getting him sentenced in United States, they say, guys, stop fighting. Stop it, guys.
So he resigns. And the Banana Man's leader of choice takes the presidency, giving the banana businessman land and a unique status to import anything he needs tax-free. And, wait for it, he refunds him for all of the coup expenses using public Honduran money. This Banana Man literally overthrew the government and made Honduras pay for it. Wow. Okay, so let's move forward to the 50s, where the coup becomes a more useful tool in the American toolkit. There's this new US agency dedicated to collecting and analyzing information from all over the world, meaning for spying. They call it the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. and it completely revolutionizes the art
Yeah,
of
okay,
ones that
war.
listen
that's
to
this
podcasts
kind
At
of
this point,
top
the
left.
U.S. is now a full-blown global superpower, no longer just looking in
Part
their
of
own
it.
neighborhood, but rather at the whole world map, investing
Yeah,
huge
he's one of the
resources into fighting
gangstalkers.
their global rival and its
Oh, the
communist
NSA,
ideology.
yeah, I heard it the NSA. My phone clicked whenever I answered
So this gets us to Iran, 1953, where Iran had just elected a new
You ever somebody rings your phone, you pick it up, and there's a little click you hear, right? Little click. Then there's somebody's on the line with you.
star politician, Mohammad Mossadegh. He rises to power believing that Iran must take back control of its most valuable natural resource, oil, which at the time was completely controlled by a British company called the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. We know it today as BP. Mossadegh is done with this. Let's kick the British out and take back our oil. But like the US, Britain is not happy with Iranians trying to take back their resources. So they warn that if they do this, there will be consequences. So the British catch a quick meeting with the CIA's Middle East guy who was passing through London, and they pitch him on this idea: let's throw out Mossadegh. The CIA's like, okay, and they kind of sniff communist vibes on Mossadegh with this big desire to nationalize Iran's oil, or at least they tell themselves they do. So the CIA agrees, and they secretly send this guy to Iran. He's the Middle East bureau chief, Kermit Roosevelt. He's like in his 30s. Oh, and yes, he is the grandson of another big coup guy, Teddy Roosevelt, who I have gone into in other videos. Roosevelt sneaks into Iran and is given $1 million taxpayer dollars to use, quote, in any way that would bring about the fall of Mossadegh. So now there's American CIA agents in Iran secretly trying to overthrow the government. And it's a rocky start at first with a bunch of failures. But they start using their money to get traction, bribing politicians, religious clerics, and other leaders to say divisive and controversial things about Mossadegh. They hire locals to stage attacks against religious leaders, making it look like they had been ordered to do so by Mossadegh. But really, they were just getting paid by the CIA to do this. And with enough time and money, they create an atmosphere of chaos and hostility and distrust among the public. Oh, and there's weapons. The CIA stashes enough weapons and explosives to support a, quote, 10,000-man guerrilla organization for 6 months, like just in case they need to, like, start a full-on conflict. The result of all of this is more violence and chaos that engulfs
All of that
the
with
capital.
1 mil?
Shops are being destroyed, bullets are flying into mosques, people are beaten, and thousands of paid demonstrators flood the street. The city falls into anarchy, all of it orchestrated by CIA money. And in the end, this all results in a bloody shootout at Mossadegh's house. He eventually gives up and turns himself in. He's put through a sham trial and found guilty of treason, and sentenced to 3 years in solitary confinement and then house arrest, where he stayed until his death. The previous ruler of Iran, Mohammad Reza Shah, which just means king, had fled the country. But now, with the democratically elected Mossadegh gone, and with the backing of the US and UK, he could charter a flight back into Iran and take control.
The Shah crowns himself in a tradition which goes back 25 centuries.
What a comeback
His
story.
title is King of Kings, and he becomes Emperor
He
of
just
his nation.
stole it, though.
Ozymandias.
The US really came out on top here. They got what they wanted. They now have an American-friendly dictator in a powerful country in the Middle East, who is now welcoming American oil companies to get in on one of the largest oil reserves on Earth. Under the Shah, Iran becomes a brutal police state. He executed military officers, student leaders, anyone associated with Mossadegh. He set up a secret police force, and life was brutal. So brutal that in 1979, the frustration of Iranians burst forth in mass protests that ran the Shah out of office and replaced him with an inspiring new leader who would turn Iran into an Islamic republic, built in part off a foundation of resentment for the US having meddled in their country. The Islamic Republic has held power ever since, and has morphed into the oppressive theocracy we know today, though maybe not for long.
Chat. Guys. I'm trying to not
They
be
shouldn't
insensitive
have
here,
took
chat.
it-
I'm
took
gonna
their
try.
oil then.
It comes
Don't
from
take
a-
their
a place of
oil
being
then,
nice. I'm
right?
trying, okay? Chat.
You took their oil, try to take their
The
oil.
Middle East has like massive
You pay,
resources
man. You pay.
everybody wants, right? It's like gold, right? They hold everybody by the balls, right? Pretty much, right? If they were to everybody chill, like pay like a bunch of taxes and shit like that, and really do it right? Couldn't they have been like an ultra superpower?
No, because they're dumb.
Right?
They could have if they were capable, but they're just dumb.
Before we go on, a quick reminder that all of these coups, these plans to
Desert.
overthrow leaders in other countries, did not require American votes or consensus or approval of Congress. It was usually just a few key men in government buildings in Washington, D.C. making this happen. These people would go on to define the Cold War and shape so many covert operations around the world that many of which we'll never know about. Okay, let's keep going. The next year in Guatemala, the CIA tried to pull the same playbook that they used in Iran, once again targeting a leader that the people had elected, but who wanted to take back the country's resources for the people, to break up these American monopolies that controlled the country's electricity and railroad. The president even starts to seize land from one massive banana company. It was often unused land that he wanted to redistribute to the locals who could farm it and feed their families, and hopefully cleanse up the system of endemic poverty in the country. Once again, I made a whole video on this.
So you guys act like this is the bananas, but I think today there's almost something similar with the avocados.
Poverty in the country. Once again, I made a whole video on this, the geopolitics of bananas in Central America. But the fact is that the US decided that they had to defend the banana companies, or else more communist reforms would spread. So the US President and Secretary of State ordered an overthrow, and the CIA got right to work. The CIA hand selects a leader that they want to be in power. And then they start giving equipment and training to a bunch of Guatemalan exiles and private soldiers. They set up a secret operation base on the outskirts of Miami. They start delivering weapons to the Panama Canal. But like the other coups, it can't just all be about weapons. They gotta own the information space. So they create a radio station that sounds like it's a local Guatemalan radio station, but really it's being operated out of a small town in Florida. And they start publishing fake news about an uprising, unrest, a rebellion. And then, at the same time, the fighters that the CIA had trained and armed invades Guatemala. Pilots start dropping bombs on fuel tanks and military posts and airports. But they weren't starting a full-on war. They weren't trying to cause real damage. They wanted it to feel like a domestic uprising, like a war was on the horizon.
Sure.
It's crazy that because at the time access information was so difficult and so bad, the power of misinformation, bro, it must be like a quote-unquote fun game for them to fucking
pull out. And for many, it
pull
totally
the strings
worked.
like crazy.
They thought that this was a real uprising.
You can make life whatever you want it to be.
The CIA was behind it all. But the president knew what was up. He had messed with the USA, and now he's hearing about it. Military leaders in his circle are feeling the pressure from the big bully from the north, and they turn on him, and he eventually surrenders. On his way out, the president addresses his people, makes it very clear that, quote, the United Fruit Company in collaboration...
Guys, today is worse because it spreads far more, right? But the thing is that at the time, there's no way to even disprove any of it, right? Today, yes, but there's still a group, even maybe small, knows the truth or knows, and you can still find information. Access information is still there. Some people will find, and these are times like that. It's like nearly impossible to find the truth or even to say it or spread it.
With the United States is responsible for what is happening.
You know, today's worse.
And just like that, one president is out and the hand-picked CIA option is in. This new regime is brutal and goes on to do horrible things. Detaining people they thought were communists, killing prisoners, breaking up labor unions, and in the process, restoring the banana company's land and ensuring that they maintained their hold on this economy. This kicks off an era in Guatemala of more political assassinations and instability, something that still plagues the country today. And yet to this day, there is no evidence that the Soviets were ever slightly interested in Guatemala. Communism was once again the excuse, but really this was about securing American business interests, tearing a country apart for bananas.
Classic.
Bananas taste the best and are the best for you.
All right, let's go to Africa.
We love bananas.
It's 1960 here in the center of Africa, a country called Congo. They just gained independence from Belgium, and they have an election. And this guy, Patrice Lumumba, wins, becomes the prime minister. But immediately, over in Washington, the communist alarm bells instantly start sounding off. Because we're in the middle of the Cold War, and Congo is a place full of tons of natural resources, including loads of uranium, the main ingredient for nuclear bombs. This is at a time when Americans are keeping gas masks next to their bed and have hordes of canned goods in their basements. And officials in Washington can't risk Congo falling into the influence of the Soviet Union. So they start focusing on this prime minister. The CIA director called him, quote, an urgent and prime objective that should, quote, be a high priority of our covert action.
People make memes about fucking, like, schools, like, oh, dude, like a bulletproof vest, ha ha ha, meme. But back then, people actually had gas masks under their desks.
They pull a more political coup than the ones before. They start allying with Lumumba's political enemies and Congo's former colonizer Belgium. They bribe politicians. They fund protests and labor movements, and they circulate propaganda. Similar ingredients to the previous coups. And when the moment is right, all these bribed politicians do what the CIA asked them to. They remove Lumumba from power. And the CIA is right there giving money and intelligence and advice to the new government. This political solution was actually not the first try. The CIA had tried to assassinate Lumumba in the past, but all of those attempts failed, which is why they turned to hijacking and manipulating Congolese politics, a brand new democracy, supporting the people who would eventually go on to put Lumumba in front of a Congolese and Belgian firing squad, making this effectively a political assassination, supported from an ocean away. And yet there's so much gray area in these coups. In this case, it's really tough to prove that the CIA's support was the key factor in Lumumba's assassination. It's debated to this day. An effective foreign-sponsored coup works like this, operating in the shadows, fueling divisions, appealing to the worst demons of the people on the ground, through money, through influence. All right, let's move on to the Caribbean in the 1960s. There's a brutal dictator here in the Dominican Republic. I mean, this guy's really bad. He's rumored to feed his opponents to sharks. But anyway, what the US cares about is that there's fear that a communist revolution could happen at any moment. So the CIA sends weapons to a group of hitmen who go assassinate this guy. It ends up being an ambush and a car chase. They're successful in taking him out, ending his 31-year rule. And eventually the US sends in forces to occupy the DR to make sure that a leftist candidate doesn't come to power. They restore order, and eventually a US-friendly candidate is elected. Okay, so now we have to head over to Vietnam in 1963.
Wait, in 1960, they were very much left. They're very leftist, but they don't like communism. I'm so confused. What's going on here?
And boy, this is a way bigger one than we have time for, but we're trying to focus on the coup element.
Am I done?
Vietnam was divided in two, between communists and pro-Western governments. The US needs the South to stay on their side, but Washington starts to lose confidence in this guy, the South's leader. He's losing a grip on the country, and the US fears that communism will take over the whole country of Vietnam. So the CIA rolls up its sleeves. It's time for another coup. This time they focus on a South Vietnamese general who also doesn't love the president, and he agrees to do the CIA's bidding. And when given the signal, the general directs his military to seize the airport and radio stations, and they block off highways. They march to the presidential palace. A bloody shootout goes down, and this president, President Diem, escapes. He happens to be with his brother.
Left economic, not left social.
But it's not going well for them, so he realizes that he needs to set up a meeting to surrender. They're going to meet at a Catholic church.
Everything is left and right, man. Everything
but when the
is
generals
left and right.
arrive, they just kill him on the spot.
Left versus right
saying,
is a
quote, to kill the weed,
economic
you must pull
thing.
up the roots. Meaning, in order to solve the problem, Diem must die. Exile was not enough. Now, the U.S. actually didn't plan for this to happen. They didn't want to kill this guy.
What is
not
left
an official order from Washington.
social?
But they made this coup happen. JFK is said to be really distraught about this. The first American Catholic president behind the coup that killed the first Vietnamese Catholic president. And incidentally, JFK was assassinated 20 days later. And one national security journalist argues that Diem's assassination actually had a greater impact on American history than the murder of JFK, because it locked the US into a decade of conflict in Vietnam, which ballooned into a long war, ending in an embarrassing defeat and a political crisis at home. One of the few coups where the US actually had to deal with the aftermath.
Losing to Vietnam.
Chad, so when did they get the bomb?
Absolutely
Okay, let's blast
shameful.
through a few of these really quickly.
They did not have it
Let's
at the
skirt
time,
over
no?
some details here. It's 1964 and Brazil is potentially veering off into communism with the rise of a new leftist leader. Lucky for the CIA, there's already a coup being plotted against him, so the US military just shows up with ships off the coast of Brazil. They airlift in a bunch of ammunition and supplies. They didn't end up having to do much, actually. Instead, they just stood by with reinforcements
Well,
and
I'm paying
watched the
attention.
Brazilian coup go
No.
down.
How is it not a good point to bring up? Having a big bad conflict or whatever with the United States, I think they just threw 2 mega bombs. They still have a bomb. Wouldn't you be scared that they're gonna drop a bomb?
Down. The leftist leader goes down and a new leader
No,
comes
because
in.
then
In 1973, there's a coup in
the other
Chile
side has
that
bombs
is a very
too.
complicated story with conflicting
Cold
accounts, and we
War.
went down a super deep rabbit hole, and we've decided
What?
that because the evidence is not rock solid, we're going to cut it for time, but definitely some crazy shit went down. I'm not saying it didn't.
because the guys that supported the other side,
I forgot. It's the weapon you only
The
actually
Soviet
use
Union.
once, because then
they also had the
everybody has
bomb.
it, and if you use it, I use it against you, the other guy uses it against you, the other guy uses it against you, and everybody booms, and then you use one more bomb, and everybody uses their bomb, and the whole world is bombed.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back in Africa, and it's the 80s, and
That's
over
the
here in
whole
Libya,
concept
the
behind the
dictator
Cold War,
Muammar
man.
Gaddafi was
'Cause they're
making lots of
both
trouble in
too
the region,
powerful
funding terrorist groups and working to
fight.
expand his influence all over the region. Then he gets a call from
you
his
want
neighbor
to avoid
Chad
the conflict.
asking
It's
for
in
help
both-
against a rebellion.
both sides' best
Gaddafi eagerly
interest to
sends
not get
4,000
into
troops to
conflict.
occupy a huge part of the country and makes friends with the new president by helping him exile his
Chad.
rival. And soon Gaddafi's getting greedy and threatening to merge Chad into Libya.
Is
The
this
US
lake,
is not
right?
into
Is
this.
this- is that
So
lake
Ronald Reagan
right there?
fires up the well-oiled
I think
coup
that's
machine,
Chad Lake.
launching a covert war, sending weapons and cash to rebels
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Chad,
this
and
lake.
supporting that
See, I'm pretty sure this is Chad Lake.
political opponent who was ousted, helping him fight back. And it works. The president of Chad has to flee, and the US backed and supported leader comes to power. And now there's a conflict, and the CIA continues arming the war even after this guy is in office. The new US backed leader rules brutally for 8 years until he's eventually overthrown by a military officer, and in 2013 he was charged with crimes against humanity, torture, and war
Chat,
crimes.
I want to say something really bad. Chat, can I say something, chat? Chat, what if you would have pitched this idea to Call of Duty to make a new branch of their company? Side branch, it was a little bit smaller. They release the games not as often. And to do the things that they do with the wars in Call of Duty, Call of Duty, Cold War, whatever, they do like the whole Ronald Reagan, they rewrite history for fun or whatever for the sake of the game. The same thing, but with like old time history, like the Romans and shit like that. But instead, I think guns and shit, they have spells and faith or whatever.
What?
Right? This guy, you
Okay,
pull in
that's
and you have
dog
your
shit.
loadout. Zeus's electrical power.
Oh man.
Venus's love power.
Okay,
And then
dude.
they're fighting and shit like that.
Go
No,
to
okay.
war,
Whatever,
Jesus.
bro.
Okay, now let's go to
It's
this little
so
island
bad.
in 1983. It's communism again, and the U.S. sends 2,000
Like
troops
Smite.
to invade this small remote
Call of Duty,
island
same
and
graphics,
remove
whatever,
their communist
everything.
leader. They didn't really know much about this small island, and they literally had to use tourism maps to plan their invasion. Anyway, American forces move in, overwhelm the Grenadian fighters who happen to be joined by their Cuban allies. The government collapses, and the U.S.-friendly leader comes to power. Okay, back down to Central America. It's 1989, and we're here in Panama, where the U.S. has control of a very important canal. And luckily, the Panamanian dictator has been very friendly to American interests.
But the US... I'm ADHD, guys, I think I'm skipping the rest of this. Sorry, chat, guys, I can't. Guys, my brain's about to blow up. I can't do it. I can't do it. Sorry. Guys, it's about the coups. I get it. It's a video with segments. It's not like one big story.
Okay, leave the video. Leave
I
the room and let it
stopped
play. Bitch. Leave the room and let it play. Bitch.
Starts losing confidence in this
I
guy,
let me
wondering
get-
if
let me
he's
get
really
right.
the best choice, ensuring the U.S. maintain easy access to their vital
should
canal.
download a
Oh,
skill for
and
Jill.
it didn't help
There's
that this
plenty
guy was
juicy
indicted in
ones
Florida
on
on
Lexus
drug
mods and
trafficking
really
and
easy
money
to
laundering
install.
charges.
Any
We gotta
coons?
get him out. But the straw that broke the camel's back for this guy was when Panamanian troops killed an unarmed American soldier in Panama City. The U.S. is done with this guy, so they invade Panama with 27,000 troops. Panama's military is crushed, and the dictator is eventually arrested and sentenced to 40 years in prison. And the U.S. ensures access to its canal after all. Okay, so now it's the end of the 1980s and the Soviets are invading Afghanistan and are meeting resistance from a bunch of fighters from all over the world who have
This
gone
is also
to Afghanistan
embarrassing.
to fight back against the Soviet occupation.
Absolutely
Many of them with fundamentalist
embarrassing.
religious motivations. But the US doesn't care about their motivation. They just care that they're willing to fight against the Soviets and the Soviets' puppet, the Afghan president.
I found it funny and lame and sadly funny that throughout history you see that like so much little money could achieve such difference and power and impact on the whole world.
And it totally works.
With barely anything.
With the help of the US,
could change
these
the world.
fighters push the Soviets back and successfully run the Afghan president out of office. And as he's being run out of office, he forebodingly warns the Americans that if they leave Afghanistan in the hands of these fighters, that it would, quote, be turned into a center for terrorism. And his prophecy was completely fulfilled. Those US-funded fighters were people whose names we know today. Osama bin Laden, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the guy who started the group that would eventually become ISIS. Those same weapons that the US sent to counter the Soviets and to effect regime change in Afghanistan would go on to be used against American soldiers years later, when the US was back, orchestrating yet another regime change after 9/11, against the very groups they once enabled. The US would eventually leave Afghanistan, only to find the country immediately falling back into Taliban rule. We're almost to the end of our list, and we're now in modern day. It's 2003, and 150,000 American troops invade Iraq. They say that they are there to find and destroy weapons of mass destruction, but their main focus is taking out this guy, Saddam Hussein, which they do in a matter of weeks. Saddam fleeing into hiding, and President Bush declaring mission accomplished, establishing an American-friendly government in Iraq, creating once again a negative byproduct by alienating huge swaths of the Iraqi people and army who form a bunch of anti-American rebel groups that go on to fight against the American occupation, some morphing into groups like ISIS who wreak all kinds of havoc on the region to this day. Once again, I made a whole video about this topic, go check it out. Iraq remains a place of deep political instability. Trust in government is extremely
I think the oil
low.
narrative is
And the
wrong.
question of how and why we did this expensive, horrific, destructive coup is still something that there aren't really good answers to. Again, you can go watch my video for more on that.
It's just this thing that
And this
people
gets
have
us
been
to the
saying
final coup on our
forever.
list.
I don't think
It's 2011
correct.
during a wave of protests spreading throughout this region, trying to take down all these strongmen dictators, one of which was this guy, Muammar Gaddafi. The same Gaddafi we were talking about earlier who's like taking over Chad. He's still here and he's still a very horrible dude. And there's worry that he's going to potentially massacre all of these pro-democracy protesters. So the US feels like it must get involved to save these protesters. They rally their NATO allies.
I watched something, and I read something, and then I talked to Destiny about it, and I don't know why, but I remember the conclusion was that the oil, like the whole like brainwash, oh it's all the oil thing, and the narrative is wrong. But I'm not gonna push that right now. But I think
to help them. But at some point, the mission switches to total regime change. We don't know exactly how this happened. Only the people in the room do. But is it surprising?
we could look into
We've seen this long arc of the US using the coup as a force for getting their way in an international conflict. It's a tried and true tool in the American foreign policy toolkit. So it's not surprising that a coup becomes a solution during these difficult decision-making processes. So anyway, the target becomes Gaddafi, and now NATO drones are firing missiles at his convoy, and he eventually gets captured and gets killed on the spot. Libya has been in chaos ever since, but it's not like it was a great place under Gaddafi. And once again, we're in a gray area where we don't know the history that didn't happen, or how things could have turned out different if the US didn't get involved. That debate lives on. Okay, so that's our list. These are our coups that we decided to go over in this video. There are so many more that we could have mentioned. My purpose in doing this broad back-to-back history of American-led coups was so that we can see patterns that emerge. How a rising superpower became really good at removing leaders that didn't align with their way of seeing the world. Or, in a lot of cases, who were not.
See, even though I like to be on your side, sometimes they didn't even know where Israel was on a map a year ago. This is like some Hassan brain dead. You see, a lot of people from the left, they like to call themselves like progressives and progression. When somebody learns something, when somebody becomes better, when somebody goes somewhere, all they do is reference the past and reference how bad they used to be, while still remaining in the same position
Yeah,
that they
again,
were.
he's wrong
a
because
a lot of times
well, no, he's not really wrong, but left and progressive isn't the same, man.
cemented. You don't, or your whatever.
Philosophies are way more
move,
complex than that.
Get better,
You just left and right.
And you try to say, ah ha ha, this guy got better.
It's
guys.
true that
I'm
people
such a
who tend to be left and be right tend to also be some other things, right? But it's not that simple. It's not that simple.
Guys, I am so in guys, I love change. We should change for the better. You changed. Ha ha ha. Dumbass. This guy actually did better. What a brain dead fucking narrative, dude. It sounds so stupid. You sound brain dead when you say that.
Friendly to American business interests. But let's be clear, the US didn't invent this. This is something that powerful countries and empires have always done. What characterized...
The reason why I said Hassan is because, like, it's an argument that he paraded a lot, and that the people now parade a lot on the internet. Oh, this guy can't talk because he didn't know where this was on the map a long time ago. Therefore, it means that he doesn't know anything now.
His US-led coups, especially during the Cold War, was how the overthrow of these governments often stamped out new democracies, budding democratic movements, replacing them with authoritarian leaders who would go on to oppress the people with the support and backing of the United States. Gotcha. And in the process, redirecting the...
Because if right now, right, I don't know what pi is, okay? And then I go to university for fucking mathematics and I become some fucking thing. You're gonna say, 2 years ago, he didn't even know what pi was. What a fucking loser. Why should we trust anything he says? Come on, bro. What is this, man?
The country's history. Lately, Russia has been meddling in the election process of the United States. And I've been reflecting on my feelings towards that. The violation of having an external power, sowing doubt and polarization and fear in my own democracy, in my own society. It feels like such a violation. And it is. This is giving me just a tiny taste of what it feels like to have an outside power pulling the strings in your country, tearing it apart for their own purposes.
What Amazon do? Trump, this is the idea that Putin wanted him to win.
Pulling the strings in your
Facebook says Russian accounts bought 100,000 in ads during the
country, tearing it apart for their own purposes. And in the process, creating more problems for the people and for the United States itself, undermining any semblance of democracy or development, all in the name of keeping the US on top and dominant over the globe.
If you hold your ad marketplace and allow fucking political opinions, you're not allowed to fucking get mad about what political opinions get pushed on your ad market. You enable that. You enable people to fucking put out their opinions for money. Therefore, you don't get to fucking pick and choose what those opinions are, because then that makes you biased. That makes you wrong. If you say, oh guys, we allow political statements to be made on ads on our website, right? And you come in and say, except for this one, it doesn't make them wrong. It makes you wrong. That's how that works. That is that system. The fuck? Because that would mean you're saying
you mean
I only want my political opinion.
Yeah, you can say that. I think just rude. No, it's bad. It's bad. You should have said it before. But I think you can change your mind. It's okay. It doesn't make the other side wrong, though. Even if you're censored by someone, you can still be right, obviously.
My political side to be on our ad. That's what you're saying. Which is, I mean, that's just wrong. What? That's propaganda. The fuck? That's corruption. It's whatever.
Brother Rex, when you threw your hair backwards I saw that hairline and fit is almost at your ears. Brother Rex, ask Mice Keith where he did it so you can fix yo shit. Also get more Botox for the nose. Ugly.
Whoa, that's just rude.
So now we got two insulin nose back to back. Now we've hit the cap. Now I'm enough. Now we've got enough. You got it out of your system now, brother? You've got it out now, brother, or what? I didn't get cooked. I got money. The guy just gave me money. I don't give a fuck. Say it again.
True.
xQc